Hello and welcome to Perspectives, where we take a deep dive into the issues of the day, and as usual, where we take a look at people's opinion on such issues. I am Ruth Osime. Welcome back to Perspectives, your Honorized News. Today, we pull back the curtain on a painful reality, one that we can no longer ignore. Across Nigeria, millions of children who should be in school are being forced into adulthood before they even get a chance to learn anything. On our highways, small hands carry trays of peanuts and bottled drinks, dodging speeding cars instead of holding pencils in a classroom. In the heart of Nigeria's lithium boom, children are breaking their backs in illegal mines, while their own futures slip away with every passing day. Despite numerous reforms and policies, child labor and child abuse remains a harsh reality in Nigeria. Laws have been written, promises have been made, yet children are still in the streets, in factories, and in mines. Why? What are the real barriers to change? Is it a failure of enforcement, a cultural norm we've accepted, or an economic crisis pushing families to rely on their children's labor just to survive? Today we will hear from those who have seen it firsthand. We will challenge the systems that allow this to continue and demand real solutions. Because if we continue to look away, if we accept this reality as just another part of life, then we're no better than the forces that exploit them. We're heading for a short break, but stay with us because we have the real business of the day coming up shortly with our esteemed guests, Adetoun, Onajabi, Dr. Sam Amadi, and Ngozi Juba. Perspectives will return in just a moment. Welcome back to Perspectives, your Honorized News. It's now time to properly welcome our guests for this engaging subject of discussion, starting from Dr. Adetoun Onajabi, who is popularly known as Just Adetoun, a fearless activist and philanthropist. Adetoun leads bold conversations on abuse, insecurity, and poor governance while advocating for the girl child, quality education, and a just society. More than a voice, she is a movement. Joining us too is Dr. Sam Amadi, a lawyer and director, Abuja School of Social and Political Thought. In his substantial capacity as a policy strategist and law and governance, Dr. Amadi has always sought to deploy his voice and activism to influence public policy on everyday realities confronting those on the lower rungs of the social ladder. And last, but certainly not the least on Perspective today, is Ngozi Juba, a human rights activist and a project director. Vision Springs Initiatives, an organization she founded with a mandate to protect and promote the rights of women, girls, and those made vulnerable by discriminatory laws, policies, and practices. She's also a member of the Child Protection Network in Nigeria. It's my utmost pleasure to welcome all of you to Perspective this morning.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Now let's start with you, Adetoun. Good to see you, Dr. Amadi. Okay, so let's start with Adetoun. Adetoun, you know, you told me some harrowing stories, especially when it comes to child labor. You understand? And when you see a child sitting on the street instead of sitting in the classroom, it actually breaks your heart. So tell us, you spoke about Monkey Village. Please tell us what Monkey Village is about to start with.
All right, so we have a whole lot of communities like that. We have Monkey Village, we have Dubai in Agege, we have a whole lot of them behind Adebola House. We're talking about Lagos where we are, and these are communities harboring minors. Our children are leaders of tomorrow. And you see these children, they're already adults. They are no longer who we are expecting them to be, or we are hopeful. They've become what they should be in another 20 to 30 years. And this is a community that is painful, that all they do is drugs, all they do is abuse of our children. All they do is teaching our children how to rap, you know, hard drugs and all of that. Broad daylight, this is not a hidden transaction. So we have a lot of those villages like that around and about, and then that is all they do. So those are the people who are really, really exploiting our children, exploiting our minors, exploiting our leaders of tomorrow.
How do these children live? What do they do for a living?
These children live on a survival per day.
But what's their living environment like?
Rough, tough, unconducive, painful.
You said they sleep on leaves or something.
Oh, there's a community. Just if you go behind Adebola House, just the pathway you see, they still have this water like a slum. We still have people there that all they do is at night, They get these plantain leaves, they wrap it all over their body. They're still living in barbaric age. And during the day, you see them, they wear little clothes, they come out on the streets of Allen Avenue, Okwebi, Link Road and all of that. They are the ones selling gala and granite and peanuts and all of that. They are there. And their parents used them because they don't have any other way. So they use their children as a weapon of survival. So they push their children to this while they are also hustling.
So all those children that you see hawking on the streets, this is where they basically
Oh,
come from.
that's where they come out from. They come out from Monkey Village. They come out from all those slums and all of that. Some of them come all the way from Agege. And then they come to do their daily chores, which is their daily livelihood. They make money. And they take the monies back to their parents. And some of them, in the course of this, they also get into trafficking, abuse, molestation, and all of that. You see all these minors, 4 years old, 5 years, 10-year-old children, they're into hard drugs. They know what it is. They can identify who you are. They can identify the value of what you're wearing, and they're looking at you just to take it and run away and to go somewhere to sell it to make a living.
Wow. This is a bit harrowing to hear. But you also said, Ngozi, about some other place called Ikorodu dump site. So tell us experience, what happened when you went there?
Okay, so we do have them, all over Lagos, and that's because that's where we reside. I'm sure we have them in other states. So a friend, another organization that works to feed, indigent persons, reached out to my organization and said they wanted to feed children. And then I said, okay. And then so I spoke to someone I'm a member of Child Protection Network. I spoke to a few friends. And this is how they said to me that there is a dump site in Ikorodu. I've lived in Ikorodu now close to 7 years, but I wasn't aware of any dump site. So this person took me to this dump site. It was around 9 a.m. in the morning. When we got there was no child. It was like a kind of dustbin. I thought it was a dustbin. And I was angry. I'm like, I made someone plan meal, for 100 people, and there are no children.
Okay, so you're taking these 100 meals with you?
So I took the 100 meal with the person with the van, with the person who was going to provide the food. We got there were just about 3 young persons. I was like, what is going on? This is not what I heard. And then we said, Madam, calm down. So about 5 minutes later, there was this whistling.
Somebody whistled? Someone whistled.
They have leaders from everywhere. We had up to 2,000 young children.
And how soon? Within a short space of time?
This is like 25 minutes. We had to send some people back because we didn't have enough for everyone. We
Over 2,000
I'm telling you, from everywhere, mostly boys. They said there were a few girls, but they were not around. And some of those boys have very dangerous injuries, smelly injuries. Some of them hadn't brushed their mouths for days.
Wow.
So in the process, we started giving food, everywhere. We were filled up. It was shocking to find some guards, army, and the rest of them who come and lend when they have issues. So what we are speaking about is not what government of Nigeria is not aware of, because they have leaders. They are so organized and coordinated. And these children in the daytime, what they do...
You mentioned army. Go to Agege, Dubai in Agege.
So they have structures that you won't believe, And so one particular young man caught my interest, very nice-looking young boy. In the dirt, you could see that he's promising, and the way he behaves, try to control other boys and things like that. So I reached out to him. I said to him, you have promise. Why are you here? And he said to me, my father married another woman. And then that woman started maltreating us. I had to leave. And so that's the story of most of them there. Either their parents or mother has gone to another man and stuff like that. Or some of them are found to be stubborn and asked to leave the house. And then that's why I started speaking to him. And all the time he was looking at me. And I was very happy. I said, yes, I've got one convert, yes? And then I kept talking to him, and then the next thing he said to me, he said, Madam, can you dash me your chain? I want to sell it because it's going to fetch me this amount of money.
He told you exactly how much he was expecting to get from it?
Yes, and he mentioned what I was wearing. I didn't even know, it wasn't gold, they said copper or something. Madam, you're wearing so he described what I was wearing. This boy is not more than 12. And I said to him, I won't sell it to you, but you can get an education. He said, yes, we have. Somebody comes to teach us for 2 hours. So there's this Child Protection Network person who's passionate, who comes to provide school on the wheels for them every 2 hours. And each time they have these 2 hours, he also comes just the way we came, whistles, they come out, take this education, and they go. So I started speaking to him about how, you can actually be my in-law, you are so promising. And then I saw him feeling good, Then he said to me, Madam, give me toothbrush and paste. And then he cleaned his mouth, wore slippers. And since then, I've been watching at any time I go around, I'm moving on in the car, I see young people trying to snatch your bag, trying to pilfer from you, and I know that they are those children. That's how they survive.
Okay. Let's get Mr. Amadi in the house for this as well, because this is just so harrowing to listen to. Do we have Mr. Amadi? Mr. Amadi, Dr. Amadi, so good to see you. Now, I want to ask a question. Does the Nigerian...
Thank you.
Does the Nigerian constitution or child rights adequately protect children from economic exploitation? And if so, why is implementation so weak? Some parents also say they need their children to work so they can survive. So how do we balance economic realities with the need for education?
Well, thank you. I think these stories provide a good background to look at both the legal aspect of it and the socioeconomic context. First, we have some reasonable good laws. Of course, the Constitution of Nigeria proclaims the guarantee of good life, right to life, dignity of all persons, including young children, also about the protection of family life, the sacredness of family life. So at those constitutional level, you can say that the Constitution kind of provides for social welfare. If you look at Chapter 2, which some people think is not so readily enforceable, but Chapter 2 talks about social justice, equity, social welfare. The criminal, both the Criminal Code, the Child Rights Act, prohibits those kind of undignified training or undignified treatment, forced labor. If you look at the Child Rights Act, even though not fully domesticated across the country, Nigeria also has signed to the Convention of the Right of the Child, and they will have the law against prohibition against trafficking of persons. We have the Penal Code and Criminal Code. Now, but what's missing here is there are gaps, obviously, in the law, but the enforcement, the conflict between culture, legality, and of course, social context. So take, for example, the story around maybe why some of these children leave home. So you are seeing intersection of homelessness, child labor, and failure of social protection. So parents remarry or whatever, they can't take care of their children. Children are victimized or oppressed at home. They run away. They run into, some kind of safe, quote unquote, safe place where fellow children who run away or some kind of gang put them together. They start learning the bad way. They start surviving. So the law has gaps, obviously, but then the law is not able to drill down to change social behavior. And so that's why legalism may not be the answer only. Law enforcement is important. State obligation, and of course, holding them accountable, strategic impact litigation. For example, some of these NGOs that are intervening at the level of providing succor can also move to the level of challenging the social policy failures that has created this crisis. So you see some people maybe go to court to challenge either government to be much more proactive in providing support or dealing with parents who are delinquent, who are not taking care of their children as they ought to. Lagos is leading in some of those social aspects. So a mixture of the failure of law in terms of gaps, in terms of non-enforcement, in terms of the conflict between social norms, in terms of the right of private prosecution and the difficulty of groups, local standard. You're going to go to court perhaps to take a public interest litigation to enforce the right of these community children or to challenge the program, the lack of social protection, lack of government intervention. Then you get to run into local standard. You go to run into some other preliminary technical restrictions and a court system that is not sensitized to the reality of this social dislocation and inequalities and the need to use law to redress them. So these are some of the challenges. But on a bigger socioeconomic map, it tells three stories for me clearly. One is that we are witnessing a significant systemic disintegration of family life. Mm-hmm. That apart from the formal sector, the failure of government, there's a systematic and continuing erosion of family value and family protection. Mm-hmm. The socioeconomic crisis have destroyed the traditional values. So we need to superimpose secular value of accountability, perhaps, on the family structure. Because if the cultural value of communitarianism, of fatherly, motherly love, of oneness, of sacrifice for children are no longer valid, then we need to impose secular value of rights of children. Again, we are seeing also that government itself has lost sight of, perhaps at the local level at this time, local government, of themselves policing and looking out, say, okay, what's wrong with these kids? Can we reintegrate them? What kind of support can we provide? So if you have a public education, have public access to food and nutrition nutritious food, then these children, even if home is not that comfortable, they will not be living in this way that they're prone to both abuse and themselves becoming abusers.
Okay. That's absolutely, I totally agree with you, Dr. Amadi, but I'm going to bring it back into the studio here. You've heard what Dr. Amadi has said about, court system not being sensitized, government losing sight. So we'll find that now, is it now, I want to ask both of you, has it now been reduced to a situation where it's now our irresponsibility as individuals to do what we can do as individuals and not rely on a system or a government policy that hasn't even really worked properly? For instance, now, you were talking about child labor and how they actually pay landlords. How much do they pay these landlords per day? And who are these landlords that they have, for instance?
Ruth, before we go on there, let me just take on what he has said. When we're talking about the government, who is the government? We are the government. Until the government begins to see these children as priority and not minority, I don't think we're getting anywhere. The laws are not going to be effective. Now, what's the closest way to get the law closer to the people and affect the law? Our clans, our obas, our kings. Rather than a child running to the street, let these children run to the palace.
Because you also say these children, the people they pay the landlords are people in the military.
You're talking about, we pay our rent per annum. You pay your rent per annum if you're a tenant. These people pay their rent per day. I remember about 11 years ago when I was working in Agege, we had over 3,000 prostitutes that we're trying to convert. First of all, they told us that, Auntie, you are on a mission impossible. The first thing you should do to us is to give us accommodation. Because they pay their rent on a daily. And these houses don't belong to government. These houses belong to police officers and armies. These are people, if you go to railway in Agege, you see these buildings that they erect. There was one time Fashola was in government. Fashola tried to demolish it. Before a few months, before you know it, they erected these properties back. And these are properties that belong to army. So when you said army officials and that, and police officers, and they take their rent per day, meaning that if you see a prostitute, for example, her bag is outside the house, you want to engage her, you take her into the room, she comes out, another person goes in. If they don't pay at the end of the day, another person is going to occupy the property.
So these prostitutes pay by evening?
They pay per day. It's 7,000 naira per day.
And so the children, how much do the children pay per day too?
No, the children also have to pay. Some of them, they don't even stay with their parents. So these children have to go out to get something to at least first put the accommodation over their roof. And funny enough, there was a case of like a 12-year-old boy who had a younger sister, 3 years, and then another one 5 years. Their mother, I know, on life herself at some point, and then she needed to take care of her younger ones, his younger ones. So he was the breadwinner. Yes. So he was the breadwinner of the family.
So where were the children staying? Where the two siblings?
There. So they have to pay 7,000 a day. So this one will go and hug Gary. This one will go to the bus park and then go and do ogogoro and all of that, sell and all of that. So by the time you want to get them off there, they'll tell you, where are you taking us to? My younger brother too is here. Where is your younger brother? He has gone to sell this, and you'll be shocked.
And the younger brother was like 4 years old?
Yes, 4 years old.
But you even spoke about them giving birth. That's when the woman is pregnant in that area. There's enough time, don't worry.
When we were working at the community, you see, most of them, they get pregnant, they don't even know who is the father of the child. So what we try to do then is, okay, you know what? Give birth to this child. At least Lagos State has social welfare department and all of that. They don't want to go to hospitals. They'll tell you when they get, government will tell them it's free medical services. Now they'll tell you to go and buy bandage. They'll tell you to go and buy gauze. They'll tell you to go and buy gloves. They stress them. They'll tell you to go and do tests. All of this is not free. So what they do is they don't even want to go to. I remember those days. What they will just do is once they see, she won't give birth, or she already she won't, they just break one bottle, maybe three bottles. Oh yeah, they're there. Hey man, kawa.
They'll break the bottle and then
break the bottle. They are waiting for the baby. Then they tell her, push. You are a strong woman, push.
So did they use this bottle to cut her open?
Auntie, wait now. Once the baby is coming out like this, they'll just the broken bottle. They use it to cut the umbilical cord. And the next thing they'll just carry this weed, shake it inside water, give the baby to drink. Agbobawo, as in Igbo, they will shake it and then give the baby to drink. The baby can sleep for another 10 to 12 hours. We go there and we tell them.
But how many women actually survive this kind of
There are a lot of them, and they are still there till tomorrow. Childbirth. They are still there till tomorrow. Now, let me burst your bubbles. When we now tell them, okay, let us take these children to the hospital for immunization, check-up, umbilical cord, this auntie will not send you. If you want carry. When social workers go there, that the social workers can't even dare to walk into their territory as a government official because they will beat them and massacre them broad daylight. So you can imagine government officials wearing the T-shirt of my own NGO just because they want to use us to get access into those slums. They break bottle to break the umbilical cord. They don't even use razor blade. Long thing is broken bottle. Then they shake it, go in water, and then they give it to these newborn babies to drink.
But you know, because it looks like NGOs are now playing a more prominent role in rescuing these children from the streets. So what kind of collaborations do NGOs, especially you run one, what kind of collaborations do you have with the government, and how can you better relate with them to ensure that we address the cause of this problem?
So for my...
What challenges do you face as an NGO?
So I can speak for Lagos very well because this is where I reside. Lagos state government is very open to partnerships.
Yes.
I am a member of I'm a member of Child Protection Network. You know, it also works with government. That agency works with government. I'm also a member of the Domestic and Sexual Violence Response Agency of the Lagos State government. So those agencies actually do respond. In fact, Child Protection Network, if they see any child hawking in Ikorodu or anywhere, we take that child, immediately that child goes to social welfare. From there, we transfer that child to Alausa. So in terms of Lagos State and collaborations, we do work. But I also do think that what Dr. Sam Amadi said is very important, because if we can't do away with policies, you know, the only challenge we have with policies and laws is the fact that we don't implement them. And that's where the work of civil society organizations come in. You know, how do we get government to do what they are supposed to do, and not just Lagos State, all over the states. So, for instance, Sam Amadi spoke about the Child Rights Act. The law came into 2003. It took a state like Bauchi 20 years to sign. So unfortunately, in our constitution, you can't bring a law and it automatically becomes a Nigerian law. Yes. So you then begin to go from state to state to begin to canvass.
But that's why we have lawmakers now.
Do you understand?
That's
yeah, but then it takes them forever. Then they look at the law. So for instance, you could go to some parts of the north, they tell you that this content of the law does not go well with our laws.
There's also the issue of culture.
Exactly.
There's also the issue
of culture. So our cultures, in as much as we say they are dynamic, there are some cultures that we should do away with. For instance, when we are talking about child labor, you know, they argue, oh, I was in traffic one time, and then one child, like 5, was, auntie, give me money, auntie, give me money. I'm like, you need to be in school. The sister say, and I told the sister, who is like 9, I said, your sister, you both should be in school. They say, if you don't give us money, how will she survive? The child spoke, and their mother was sitting somewhere watching us. The child spoke on behalf of her sister, that if she doesn't make money, how will she fend? So culture has also socialized them to become adults,
exposure
to think.
And awareness, creating more awareness.
So the kind of awareness and exposure that you have and I have is different from theirs. Do you know that there are times Lagos State government come and pick these people off the streets and they return? It's like the people you are calling prostitutes, sex workers. There was a time sex workers, government of a particular state went and took sex workers off the streets, gave them money. I think, let me even be specific. I think it was in Zamfara when the governor was having issues with sex workers. He took them off the street, gave them money and said, go into business. These people relocated to Kaduna and continued their business. Do you understand? So I know that government has not done all they are supposed to do. Civil society, that's why our role is to hold them responsible. So for my organization, we don't even chase around looking for children. We tell government, this is your responsibility. Implement the child rights law, you know, in the state. Make sure, and then apart from the child rights law, we have many documents that Nigeria has signed. Oh, yes. I read something which says that the Sustainable Development Goals 8.7, by 2025, that child labor should have stopped. This is 2025.
But this is 2025.
Exactly.
It's getting worse.
Do you understand? So the documents are there, implementation is the problem.
I think there should be more stringent rules for things like this. And
maybe like have task forces.
Yes, but let's get back to Dr. Amadi in the house. Okay, we're going on a break now, and then we'll come back to discuss this. So don't go anywhere. So as usual, get your cup of tea, and we'll see you right back on Perspectives. Welcome back to Perspectives. Can we have Dr. Amadi in the house, please? Dr. Amadi, are you there? Okay. Now, I want to ask.
Yeah, sure.
Okay. What are the rights of child labor of a child laborer if they are rescued? Are there legal pathways for them to receive rehabilitation and education?
Well, the Child Rights Act and the Child Rights Convention grants children rights that are enforceable. Basically, right to education, right to parental care, right to welfare, food, family life. Again, there are 3 issues in child labor. First is the the idea of children working. And so you see some countries, maybe 18 years, children are doing some intellectual work, but they're not going to be doing some different kind of work. So look at the Labor Act. There's a difference between the work a child can do, child defined as 18 years. So at home, in some of our cultures, children also work, so help their parents at home. So when we talk about child labor, we're talking about some kind of work that is not good for a child in terms of physiology, in terms of psychology and mental development. 2, forced labor, some aspect of labor that's also forced. For example, those kids who are forced into sex work, who are forced into maybe working in places, forced labor of all types. And thirdly, we're also looking at children who ought to be in school, so deprivations. So instead of being in school, they are at work. So they have a right under the Child Rights Act, and generally under the African Charter, which has now made it with African flavor. Children have right to family life, right to education, health care, to be in school at the school age, and the right to be taken care of. And this right creates obligation for both parents and the state. Now, the state's foremost obligation is to ensure that these rights are protected by all the persons involved, parents, community, or even external persons like schools or other people who may, hijack or hire children. And that's under the common law as well. Children cannot sign contracts except contracts for their own welfare, beneficiary, their own supply. So a child who signs a contract that for any other thing is voidable or void, depending on the circumstance. I think I heard very important thing about individuals and states. Government is not about governmentality, it's governance. And that's why government collaborates with NGOs. So when we talk about government, we don't mean that government will have to do the things. The churches can help government, traditional institutions can help, NGOs can help. But the key thing here is state action. And if you look at this, people like Amata Sen or Amata Nosbon, who have done a lot of work in these areas, bordering on poverty, inequality, and degradation of children and vulnerable persons. The critical thing that drives change is state action. And that state action is that the state now takes the responsibility, find out circumstances in which children are doing this labor, circumstances in which children are being victimized, oppressed. Some of them will require physical support, finance, providing food, helping parents to cope, making education free. And that's why the idea of real free compulsory education, it should be taken seriously. If it's free and compulsory, it means therefore that parents can be prosecuted for denying their children free basic education. And with the new proposed education policy, which means 12 years, full secondary school will be the minimum compulsory every child should go through. So the question then is, if a child is not in school, then it's a violation of that law, and therefore government has a responsibility to fix it by saying, is it finance? Is it the parents who for cultural reasons don't want their children? Is it a cartel that are recruiting these children for sex work or from other kinds of criminality? Whichever it is, the government state action means you break it, provide what is missing, resources, change mentality, enlightenment, overthrow bad cultural practices. So if there are cultures that predestine children or predicate them to life without going to school, 12 years, they should get married or they should get to work or they should be learning one trade, and this is contrary to the law of the land, then it's an obligation of the state to punish those who are responsible, to help those children. So, for example, the case that children come back, you take them to, take them away from those places and they return back, it's because the provisions are not there. Maybe, yes, it's child labor, it destroys them in the future, but they are gaining at the moment with the proceed of crime, with the way they are at least eating, live in an environment in which they are not constrained. So government has responsibility also to find a way to take them out and put them in families or places where they're,
It's good that you mentioned the government, but some argue that corruption and lack of political will are key barriers in all these ideas that you're bringing onto the table. So how can the government restore public trust in its commitments to end child labor? Because it's all well and good for you to say all that you have been saying, but how can the government win the trust of the people that they're trying to help? Because from what we can see right now, it's as if the government plays little or no role. It's the NGOs and private individuals that are now taking up these responsibilities, which they shouldn't be doing. It should be out of choice, not from lack of choice.
But
so how can the government end the trust of the people?
Government does not necessarily have to. Exactly. The government should end the trust, by caring. In the first place, the reason why NGOs are liked, so to say, is because they cared. They come there, they don't put them in jail, they don't use task force to come and beat them up. They talk to them, like the lady in the studio. She took her time. You are a nice guy, you look nice, you should be in school. What's going on? And that's a trust factor. Government shouldn't be seen as coercion. Government is first compassion, engagement, and then transformation. So if you come to government as a way of, you send military people, they round them up and brutalize them, then there will be no public trust. So it's changing the idea of government to governance, solving problem through state action, which can come through NGOs or through churches, whoever is best fitted to drive action. But government should authorize it and support and provide for it.
Thank you, Dr. Amadi. Now, Tom, let's get back to you. Talking of trust, it is discouraging to know that even with all that Dr. Amadi has said, it's still not very encouraging. We don't still believe that the government is playing a large enough role to handle this menace in our society. So aside from the government, who else do you think can have a lot more impact in changing the lives of these children and redirecting their
government wants to
growth?
work. Government knows how to work. When government wants to sensitize people not to come for them, they know where to go to. You see, these governments, they have database of everybody. Look at the election period. They have database of organizers, they have database of carpenters, they have database of all these people. And you see, they bring them for meeting, political meetings, and they give them this 1.5 gele. So if the government wants to reach out to the last man standing, they have the avenue. Let's be truthful to ourselves. Yes. Leave these policies and regulations. If the president is coming and the president says tomorrow that he wants to see all the Obas in Lagos that are over 100, I remember during the last protest when they said that the Commissioner of Police should call everybody on board and go back to their communities to encourage people not to come out to protest. They wrote letters to us and they invited us to police college. I was shocked when I got there. I saw Babalawos, I saw Onishegu, I saw people with calabash, I saw Obas and chiefs with everything regalia. And I'm like, just for protests? So if the government wants every child who means and matters to this government out of the street, they know how to do it. Where are our Obas? Where are our royal queens? If the Oba, if in a clan, they tell you that we don't want to see anybody hawking. If you see anybody hawking on the street, bring them to the palace. That is what used to happen those days. The fear of the Obas and the queens. Where are they today? They have become models on social media. Yeah. Our Obas only wear Rolls Royce and all of that, and they go to parties and they leave their primary responsibility. Listen, we need to understand who we are talking about here. We are not talking about people who can take decisions. We're talking about people who the economy, who the society, who security, who safety and future has led them into taking decisions. They have become professors of crime. Our Obas should sensitize from their communities. I don't want to see anybody hawking. It's a law and it's a law. And the Obas can send their people to go and pick anybody. Where are our royal mothers? You see Obas having 3 wives, 4 wives. What are they doing? For crying out loud. We don't need you in parties. We need you to put mothers in place. We need you to put the underdeveloped in check. Let them understand that even if they are not going to school, let them have vocational skills, that they are well trained. But it's not happening. And we're leaving it to the government. The government is a business on its own. These people are association of rogues and thieves who wants to steal public funds, and they do everything humanly possible to secure their positions. And you're expecting them to come and cater for the people they are exploiting? Don't we have people paying tax? Where are our taxpayers' funds going to? What are they using them for? Give these children monthly allowance. Tell them to go to school, give them books, give them uniform, give them free food. You tell people to go to government school that is free, but you don't give them food in their tummy. An empty stomach can never be an intelligent child.
You're right.
Go to primary health care centers. They can't even get free drugs. They can't even get free hand gloves. And you're telling me they shouldn't use their children for exploitation. They are abusing their children because they are their hopes. That's why you see our Yahoo boys. Their parents are in support of what they do. Because most of them, they know that their children have the energy to do this. So let's face reality. I've worked as a field worker for 17 good years of my life. I have seen pain, and I have seen our children die broad daylight. I have seen neglect of the government. So I understand what I'm talking about. So let's stop perambulating and packaging things around government policy. If we want to make our society safe for our children, who are the future of tomorrow, you and I will take it as a responsibility. Let us march forward to the legislative angles and tell them today, you people must pass these things into law. Our legislators sit down and then they talk about things where they can make money.
I wonder why it's so difficult to pass it
We
into law.
just need to face the reality of time.
And that's the truth, because like
the
you rightly
reality
said,
of time is if we don't rise up to our responsibility, we are losing our future generation.
Speaking of future generation, what do you think that Nigeria... I can't even imagine Nigeria in 20 years.
Absolutely.
Because if you look at the Nigeria of today, do you understand? The sheltered children and the children on the streets, there's a gap.
Absolutely.
But in Nigeria in 20 years, what's going to happen?
It's going to be very, very...
The disparity
it's going to be...
The disparity will be unbearable.
It's huge.
I spoke about 2,000 children from one dump site. I do not know how many dump sites we have in Ikorodu because I learned that was not the only dump site. I do not know how many we have in Agege, Surulere, and then we keep focusing on Lagos. I don't know how many they have in Abia State, in Kogi State.
Now let me make it clear. It's
Sorry,
not easy, even for NGOs. It's not easy penetrating into these dump sites. You pay them. You even pay their leaders.
At the end of the day, these are the people that come and work with us.
Yeah, they come to work with us.
So they are within our space to a certain extent.
Our
So you cannot say that you are removed.
Our health
Your health is at risk.
So you buy gala on the street and then a child who is sweating and has hepatitis A or B sells gala to you. You just you eat the gala. You've gotten an infection somewhere. It's contact. It's sweat contact.
Or even people who do your nails. Or
Oh,
people
yes.
who cut your hair.
So if everybody keeps saying, I'm sorry to say this, but we are living in a society where everybody who claims to have a name or a brand is living on perception. They don't see these things as our responsibility. They see it as it is the government and that is it. Your one vote is for 8 years. Meaning that you can insist that the government does the right thing for the next 80 years.
Yeah, but the sad thing is that stomach infrastructure plays a major role.
We are not
you give
all on
them
the
bread
same
and give them 5,000 naira.
Yeah.
They are willing to sacrifice
5 gele.
So if a young guy could...
Mama, you see them, mama.
But it's also lack of exposure.
Mama, that they are dying, see, give them instruction to stand on the streets and to ensure that there is no child hawking. We can do it if we want to do it.
That these people that vote for these government officials sacrifice 4 years for 1 day of pleasure.
And their own children also suffer the same thing.
And their own children, because I have heard of lawmakers who have said they've tried, when they were campaigning, they tried to tell them long-term plans. We want to build a school, we want to build hospital, we want to build this. But the rival comes and gives them 5,000 naira and they're not listening.
And now let me bust your bubble.
Their brains are foggy.
There was a day we went
you can't blame them because it's hunger.
Because
it's hunger.
We can't blame them.
There was a day we went to Lagos State House of Assembly and then we insisted that today, the speaker, which is the former speaker, Obasa, today, this is one. The man called us and said, Madam, please, people should come and sit down. I want to have a conversation. The man opened up his heart and told us that when you people come here to agitate that this is what the government should do, you have come to report that the governor is not doing this society is not doing this, association is not doing this. That the minute we are leaving, another set of people are coming and say, please leave those ones, so they are just here to make noise. Just give us 500,000. We are okay on our own. Yes.
What are they supposed to do?
Yes.
Kind of information?
So when we are agitating, some people are saying that, please, so we don't have energy for this agitation. Please, we don't understand.
Then they choose
just
to answer those ones.
Yes.
No,
So they choose to answer those
exactly.
ones.
It doesn't
long-term
make sense.
investment.
But listen, politicians also use these people as weapon. Have you forgotten during the election?
Yeah, but you are the same one. The same politicians who can reverse the course of these people's lives.
Whether they decide to do it or not, I don't know. But they are just letting us know that.
No, but why are they listening to the one that they would rather give 500,000?
How would they know when they are well dressed? When they are well dressed and they are coming with their paperwork.
That you, as an NGO, have gone to meet this lawmaker and brought these ideas. This is how we can move forward.
Exactly.
And he's telling you that somebody else will come and do the exact opposite.
Is that what a leader is supposed to do?
As a leader, he should abide to the wishes.
They don't accept what they say. They are just trying to tell us that the same way we come to mount pressure is the same way some people come.
But they know who.
When they are going there, what was their mandate?
No, but they know whose pressure they should use.
Oh, of course they know.
Exactly.
Of course they know. But
So
they are just letting us know that
it doesn't matter.
Our direction is not the same.
What I'm saying is that even, yes, that as shocking as that is to hear, you as the lawmaker, even though the long-term gains, you know that the long-term gains far outweigh short-term gains. So even if you and Adetoun come to me as a lawmaker and say, this is what you want us to do, which will yield results in another 4 or 5 years or whatever, I would rather listen to you than listen to Ngozi, who comes and says, oh, don't ignore them and just give, because I'm looking at the long-term projection.
You're still not getting it. Auntie Ruth, I'm here to have a meeting now, and then they tell me come in. And then I go, I speak mine, and then you're well-dressed, and then you go. Nobody will have the perception that you're coming to negate the other people. But it's left for them to say,
but it's left to the lawmakers.
Yes, it's left on them. But what they are trying to let us know is, Madam, in as much as you people are pushing for, there are also some people that they don't buy this issue of... It
still doesn't justify their lack of performance
no,
as lawmakers.
Their lack of performance is different. Let's see politicians as business people. There's no two-way thing about it. You see a lot of young people tell you they're going into politics to make change. You're going to meet the same people, civil servants, who are the killers in our society. So the problem is, let us leave government out of this.
And see how we can solve this.
And let's see how we can take...
There's no way any country will work without... Because if you're saying leave government, I also heard you making some conversation when I joined, before we came to the studio. We keep saying we are the problem. Do you know the number of young people who died during NSAS? Do you know the number of young people who died? I went to end bad governance, and I know the number of guns that surrounded me and my colleagues who came to say, people have a right. You can't tell people where to stand and protest. We had more than 20 guns pointed at us for end bad governance at Alausa. Do you understand? So it's not, there's no way you can, if you say leave government, everything, the machinery, the money, the policies are in the hands of government. It was the Nigerian government who went to the United Nations as a member state to say that we are adopting these laws. So how are you going to throw away? There will be chaos.
You might not leave government, but I think what the decision is that you cannot rely on just government.
Now, I'm overweight as an NGO person because I have to do government work. I told you, there was a day I went into police station for a case. Before I left there, I had 4. I told you, a woman had bitten off the ear of a 9-year-old, a 12-year-old boy that looks like a 9-year-old.
Bitten off with her teeth?
Bitten off with teeth. And there's an auntie. They said the boy is stubborn. They took to her. And when I saw the boy, the marks I saw on the boy made me weep. I left everything that took me to police station. It was a case of a girl that was raped. In the, not raped, a minor, you can't be abused. You know. I had to take that boy to General Hospital first, before the thing that brought me to police station. Do you understand? So I am overweight, and my colleagues are overwhelmed by the number of cases that come to us every day. And that's because we are almost taking up the, and Adetoun has been saying this, we've almost taken up the role of government. We should not be. What NGOs are set up to do? Yes, what we are supposed to do is hold the government accountable. And see if you say leave government, we can't stop. So for instance, I talk about Lagos. Lagos State has what they call the Domestic and Sexual Violence Response Agency. Lagos State, if I call them now and say a woman is being beaten in Ajegunle, they will provide me with a vehicle, we'll go and pick up the man. Lagos is doing it. So what we need to demand is more. We can't give up on that.
No, wait. So let's get back to Dr. Amadi so that we don't forget that it's in the house with us. So Dr. Amadi, you've heard this very, very painful complaints and very, very passionate plea for government to play a role, a better role, a stronger role in the lives of our children, because they are the greater tomorrows. So will stricter labor inspections and harsher penalties be enough? Or do we need a more systemic change? What consequences can be imposed on people who abuse children for work? How can the government play a more role to ensure, like Adetoun just said now, for instance, if the Obas, make a rule and say, okay, you cannot sell on the streets at a certain time or whatever, what more role can government play? Let's feel their presence. What punishments can be given if these rules are broken?
Well, thank you very much. I think, look, we have to bring the two together, the sanction and the systemic change. Okay, so this is how it works. They talk about local governments. Now, the local government is a system of government. And by the way, when we talk about government, we mean both the state, federal, local government, and of course, informal government, depending on where you are. They all constitute government. So the authority to impose sanctions, if you impose real sanctions, that's number one. 2, if there's credible threat that you will be found out and prosecuted. The problem with sanctions oftentimes is that people make sanctions, but there are no credible threat of being arrested,
implementation,
found out and prosecuted. And so, exactly. So the theories of penology and criminal justice says that what deters is credible possibility of being dictated, prosecuted, not necessarily so if you give a 15-year jail term and the chance that I will escape judgment is 80%, I will take the risk. If you put a 1-year jail term, but the chance of escape is zero, I will not do it. So credible law enforcement procedure is key here. That we have a law and somebody monitors, patrols, and when somebody finds this dump site or these places where children are being molested, abused, they take it up, prosecute everybody, including parents. Look, if you look at some part of Europe, for example, some parents go to jail for violating the rights of their children. Now, what the state has done is that the state is not the one who is changing behavior by forcing people to behave well. Okay. The state is using one enabler, which is deprivation, poverty, punishment. And second enabler is incentive, support. So, for example, that's why we give food in schools to help encourage. That's, for example, tax credit. So assuming some working parents, if you put their children to school, you have some kind of tax deduction, or you have some kind of access to services, or you have some kind of privileges or support. It's an encouragement. So 2 levels. One is that disincentive by punishment. One is encouragement. And the third aspect of what government does is also that government can bring together, convince stakeholders, corporate people, communities, churches, and help them to begin to execute, whether it is enlightenment, whether it's discouraging their members, whether it's reporting their members of their communities who are in violation of this act. So I understand the cynicism about government. Look, we in Africa are victims of one concept of government: irresponsible, terrible government. And we behave as if that's what is called government. There's no problem solved in this world, whether it's in China with poverty, whether in the Scandinavia with social welfare, that is not solved by government action. Government mobilizes, government signals, government conscripts, constraints. Government is not just about people in the House of Assembly collecting money and playing dead brain. We need to reinvent this idea of government. And not just people in power or elected, but also people appointed, bureaucrats, civil servants. So until we begin to create this positive sense of government, which is ownership of problem, and then deciding at what point that problem can be solved best. So for example, if you look at the talk of USAID or budget of any government, there are money for non-profits. There are foundations for churches to intervene under a regulated aspect to some problems that they have more credibility. The church or the mosque will have more credibility to solve problem of domestic violence, to help husbands perhaps behave better. But the government will be there to punish failure and to use those churches, support the resources, to mount campaign in their members to live up to those standards. So I think the fact that our government is in disarray totally, crazy sense that government is not necessary. No, it's government that should authorize, support, influence NGOs to do their work. Okay. Now, NGOs are doing the work of government because there's no government. And the weakness is short because NGOs don't have the power to enact at that level.
Thank you, Dr. Amadi. Now, Towa, I want to bring you into that comment that Dr. Amadi made about civil servants. But you feel the civil servants have played a major role in even enhancing this monster in our midst.
Civil servants are a menace. Civil servants don't want the system to function. Civil servants don't want us to bring technology so that we have a database that has details of how many children are in Agege, how many children are in Ikoyi, how many children are in Oshodi. By now, the government should have a database. And when children don't go to school, the government should be able to tell us that, okay, this person is absent, this person is in this place and all of that. Will civil servants allow it to work? No. Because every paper that passes to the civil servant, they want to take a penny out of it. So they can't allow the system to function. They don't have interest in changing what the society is going through. I have a court on my hand. Somebody called me on social media the other day and told me that there's a case of child molestation. In a day, I do nothing less than 15 to 20 cases in a day.
Are you serious?
In a month, we do nothing less than 400 to 500. So when you're talking Lagos State, I am sitting on their neck like I need ambulance buses, everything, and they make them available because they don't want my trouble anymore. Now, a civil servant, when I left the office, you know what the civil servant said? Madam, they have been calling you for the past 1 week plus that a 1-year-old child has been sexually molested. You know what the woman said? Boy, it's not a big deal now. Ma, I twisted my hand, gave her one punch, police, everybody came. I scattered the whole place and I started to send message to the, what do they call it, head of all civil servants and all that. If I'm going to jail. So when you imagine a civil servant not taking it passionately that a child has been molested. She told me that their phones are not working. The lady said she has been sending texts. So I took the number, I called the number, and the number rang right there. So civil servants are a problem. Even for government to make change, civil servants don't allow. And when the government officials want to come out and tell you the truth, they cannot function properly well because of civil servants. The head changes, but these are people that have been in the same system for the past 20 years, 30 years. It's a cabal. Now, with what Doctor said, Doctor, government cannot stand up and effect advocacy. They cannot stand up and effect activation and punishment because they have not also fulfilled their obligation. If you have given children free uniforms, you've given them free food, you've given them everything, and they don't go to school, you can take legal action. But the government don't even have homes where they keep these children when they pick them up. A lot of homes that you see the governments are working with are NGOs. Ogun State does not have a correctional center. I drove all the way from Lagos to Jebu about 4 weeks ago to pick up a minor that they poured hot water on. And somebody was telling me, don't take this boy to Abeokuta Correctional Center. They have bed bugs. There are maggots all over in their mattresses. They don't have fans. They don't have even fans. Dakwa Abiodun is a governor in a state, and they don't have correctional center. First ladies of state, what are they doing? Let them take it as an assignment to also work. NGOs are working back to back. But who is funding them? Individuals, philanthropists. Go to Ogun State General Hospital. It is one person that is building a hospital, and one governor is there moving from one party to the other, enjoying himself, and then they are giving us the picture that the government is functioning.
No, I think to a certain extent, you know, each governor has a role, a pertinent role that they have to play. And maybe what needs to be done is to create more awareness about the efforts that they're making.
Any role that the governor of any state is doing that doesn't include children, you're not doing anything.
But I'm sure.
You're not doing anything. We're talking about Lagos State, for example. Let's give it to Jide Sanwo-Olu. He's not my friend, and he will never be my friend. But this guy has prioritized anything that has to do with children. You cannot call a governor non-stop for 4 years. Babajide Sanwo-Olu has unused ambulances now. Babajide Sanwo-Olu has buses. About 3 weeks ago, there was a case that we came. In the middle of the night, after 1 p.m., they brought bus to come and pick up victims.
Hopefully that would also apply in
It doesn't apply in Oyo State and other states.
No, let's hope they take a lead from someone.
Oh, yes, let them do.
I have to go now. I know that I wish we just had more time. I wish there was even a part 2 for this. But I need to thank you so much for your very strong views. And I hope that everybody in government, everybody in politics, or any human being that wants to do NGO or whatever has taken a cue from this. And we all have to collectively work together as a unifying force. Every governor from state, Ogun, or whichever state will pull their weight. So I want to thank everybody. I want to thank everybody for being with us. Thank you, Ngozi, for being with us. Thank you, Adetoun, for being with us. And thank you, Dr. Amadi, for being with us this morning. And I hope our listeners have learned a thing or two from this. So as we've seen today, child labor is not just a matter of laws and politics. It's about culture, economics, and the struggle for survival. Children should not have to bear the burden of their family's survival. A nation that fails its children fails itself. Parents and society must stop accepting this as normal. If we leave this trend to continue, the consequences will be fatal. Change starts with awareness, but it must end with action. Let's not just talk. Let's demand better. For every child, for our future. And as I always say, remember that life is a learning curve. That's all we have time for today. You've been watching Perspectives here on Arise News with me, Ruth Osime. Until same time next week, let's keep it positive and do have a wonderful week. Goodbye.